Welcome back, everybody, to the sixth and penultimate session of our conference. I'm really happy today to welcome three staff members of the Deyohahá Indigenous Knowledge Center. We have the relationship with the Indigenous Knowledge Center is as old as CNAIR itself, and it's a great privilege to welcome you all here. I just want to give some introductions before they start the talk. Tanis Hill is a member of the Mohawk Nation Turtle Clan from six nations of the Grand River. She's the Archive and Special Projects Manager at Deyohahá Indigenous Knowledge Center at Six Nations Polytech. She has been at Deyohahá for 10 years and worked as a finance manager for the previous 20 years. Having no archival background beforehand and learning everything on the job, she is grateful to the GLAM community for sharing their knowledge and advising her on her many questions, being able to attend events like this, and now being able to present on her experience. Taylor Gibson is of the Turtle Clan of Cayuga Nation from the Six Nations of the Grand River. Taylor is currently the senior researcher at the Deyohahá Indigenous Knowledge Center with over 10 years of experience working in archives. Taylor is a lifelong learner of the Deyohahá language and has a passion for preservation of Haudenosaunee documentary history, culture, and languages. Previous positions have included archival research at Six Nations Polytech, archivist, and then external engagement officer and advisor for Library Archives of Canada. And is now a current is currently a senior researcher at Deyohahá. When he's not working, he's enjoying spending time with his family. And Heather Bomberry is from Cayuga Nation and Turtle Clan, residing on the Grand River territory of Southern Ontario, Canada. She is the administrative assistant and archivist at Deyohahá, a part of the Six Nations Polytech for the past 14 years. She is a single mom of 7 children and newly grandmother of 5. And she has served on the board of directors of Six Nations Polytech for 2 years as a student representative, and then 3 years until she became an employee. And at this point, I would like to let you take the floor.
Thank you for that intro. We're very happy to be here today. We'd like to, first of all, congratulate the CNAIR on their 10th anniversary. We've enjoyed working with you all these years, and we look forward to working with you the next 10 years. We'd also like to give out a big thanks and a shout out to Rick Hill for his contributions to the Indigenous Knowledge Center and Six Nations Polytechnic, and just for being mentors to us as well. He was the original director at the IKC. He's since retired and doing other things. And we also like to thank our current director, Bobby Henry, for allowing us to come and present to you today. Okay. So in this presentation, we will be presenting on highlighting our cultural and language preservation efforts, the historical experience with researchers at Six Nations, and specifically we're going to highlight the Wa story collection and the Fenton photo negative collection that we have received from the American Philosophical Society. So just a brief history of where we're from, Six Nations territory. We are originally northern New York. So that is that photo or drawing on the right-hand side of the screen. And currently, we are located on southern Ontario, so you can see that in the top left of the screen where we have marked Six Nations Polytechnic. And so you can kind of compare where we are now to where we used to be. We're spread out. There's still many nations in New York and, in the States and Ontario and Canada. But we were originally granted 6 miles on either side of the Grand River, which is 300 kilometers or 174 miles long. And currently, I don't know if you can really see that little square, there's about 5% of that land left that we currently have right now, that we're situated on. So just some brief info, background on Six Nations Polytechnic that first opened its doors in 1993. It was originally tasked to increase the number of post-secondary grads, help community learners learn more about their culture and their history, and to also address the urgent need in the community to ensure our heritage, culture, languages, and practices are retained. I think it's 31 years now. Polytech is celebrating 31 years this year. And in about 2006, we started developing the community. Six Nations Polytechnic and other organizations started on the idea of creating an Indigenous Knowledge Center to house information and just make it more accessible to the community. And its grand opening was in 2010. And the 3 main functions of the center are to preserve and nurture Indigenous knowledge and languages, foster and support collaborative research in Indigenous knowledge, and provide for the public appreciation and education regarding Indigenous knowledge.
So Deyohahá is a Kyogo word meaning 2 paths or 2 roads. So the point of when we had some of our elders or our guardians with us, and we were talking about a name for the center, because it was in the inception Indigenous Knowledge Center. So they came up with the word Deyohahá. So it's bringing together the 2 streams of consciousness, the ancestral Indigenous knowledge with the best of modern academic knowledge, in order to advance the overall well-being of all of the people. The scope of services that we provide is we archive of Haudenosaunee knowledge, the conferences and symposiums, curriculum programs. We do a lot of lectures, workshops, PD and e-learning opportunities. Cultural sharing and training, build a better understanding of the value of Indigenous knowledge. So Deyohahá is a knowledge mobilization center that maintains an archive of Indigenous knowledge. So the image on the right there, the dish with 1 spoon. So like the idea of the dish with 1 spoon, this knowledge is for everyone to share. So inside Deyohahá, so I am in charge of the archives. So when we started back in I've been there since 2010, and I always like to tell the story of when we started. I was on a program, like a work experience program, and I got put in the basement with Rick Hill and all of these banker boxes, and they were all listed, here's language, here's culture, medicines, and he's just kind of said, here you go, do something with this. He actually developed our topics list, so I kind of just went from that and started organizing all of his documents, his 1-pagers, his photographs, newspaper clippings. So we have a huge archive, of documents and maps, photographs, audio, video, artwork. We have a huge library of, I think I could say around 3,000 books now. And at Polytech, we already had a library established for the students. And then we kind of took out things that weren't relevant to the history and culture, and then in the last 14 years, we've got many donations of books now, so we've expanded that. And Six Nations Polytech, actually, we have 2 campuses now. So there's the local town, Brantford, which is about 25 minutes from us. So we have enough books that we were able to take the duplicates to Brantford. So the students at the Brantford campus can access some of those books as well. So I always tell people we're like an archive, a library, and a museum all in one, because we have tons of artifacts donated to us too as well, which are courthouse dolls, mats, bowls. I think we have a cradle board, some moccasins. And yeah, like I mentioned, we have tons of donations and gifts since over the last 14 years. So this is just a picture of our center, small but mighty. So we have over 20 filing cabinets that I've had the pleasure of organizing. And on the left there, you can see our library. In the front, that's a mat cabinet. And then we have a few display cabinets as well. And the picture on the right there, so we have language, one cabinet all dedicated to language. So I've separated it into each nation, like of the 6 nations. So that's just a picture of that.
In 2008, Six Nations Polytechnic held its first recognition ceremony and inducted 5 Indigenous knowledge guardians. These are like the professors of our Indigenous knowledge, our Haudenosaunee knowledge. There have been several ceremonies since. I think we got up to 31, and sadly, I think there's only 17 of them that are still alive. So we're here to try and help them share what we know as well. And bringing this information from the archives back to the community is something we're working on as well, but I'll get into that a little bit later. So the first acknowledgement was 2008, and we've since inducted Cayuga language names rather than like English names. So I Wanos Das. Does that sound right, Taylor? This is the term to link to the concept of rafters for protection. So you may know that the Haudenosaunee people are people of the longhouse, and we extend rafters to create the more length in the longhouse, or to add families in. So this is someone who protects the matters or all of our concerns. So they know I want to say everything collectively. Some teach language. Most of them have been teachers most of their lives. They know the language, they know culture, and they just shared that and passed that on all of their lives. Another recognition category is IYD. This term is not just academic. It is someone highly familiar with things, business, and have a lot of experience and know it well. So for example, these used to be called community scholars, and these are people that kind of earn a living or have a business. It is their business or duty, I guess, to share their knowledge of traditionally, like we have dancers, potters, artists, traditional wellness people that are in this category that we recognized. And then under research support, this used to be associate professors. So this is more our doctors and the community researchers, academic researchers. This term is linked to knowing things that have been written, symbolism recorded visually in some way, or linked to books and papers. And then, of course, we have additional recognitions. Post-secondary partners recognizes an institute's longstanding commitment and support for Indigenous post-secondary education through respectful relationships with S&P. And that top belt with the 3 figures that just represents each partner with the student in the middle. Oh, and then the new partnerships is this belt here. And we presented one of these, I believe in 2014, to the American Philosophical Society for our partnership with them. And this picture on my screen is Tim Powell, our dear friend that we miss, and Rick Hill meeting at Six Nations Polytechnic, and he brought the belt with him, which is something these are meant to be living documents or recordings, so we're glad to have it here. Brian brought it out at lunch. Thank you, Brian. And we got to see it again. So what have SNP and the Deyohahá Indigenous Knowledge Center done to preserve language and culture? We've done quite a bit. Our accredited programs include the Bachelor of Arts in Ungohungwe Languages in Mohawk or Cayuga, the Honors BAOL program, which is the 4 years, and both are accredited by SNP, so we're able to accredit those programs ourselves. And this was formerly the Ungohungwe Language Diploma Program, which was a 2-year program accredited through McMaster. Other accredited programs are our STEAM Academy, which is our high school, where students are able to get 4 years of high school, their diploma, and then 2 years of college. And from that is also a STEAM land-based summer camp. This is for grade 8 students, and they get a Reach Ahead credit as well. It's a 2-week camp, and they're able to get a credit towards high school, and I believe it was for grade 10s as well this year to get a credit. And additional qualification courses for teachers, and those are for teachers that are already certified to get extra professional development, I guess, and that's for grade kindergarten to grade 12 teachers. And our language programs include Cayuga Adult Immersion, and that's a 2-year program. It's running right now, and that's 2 years straight through. I believe they're doing 6 hours a day. We do conversational language workshops. I guess they're more short-term, evening, 6 to 8 weeks long. Language and culture camps. We ran these during March break for children, I believe, grade 6 to 8, something like that. And they're able to learn language. You'll see in the picture there, they're outside doing things. And then the picture on the left-hand side just shows some of the language that they would be learning inside. And 1 year we were able to have the adults, their parents attend with the students, which just enhanced that program. They're able to use the language at home as well. And we also have language cafes and the ever-popular language bingo. And those bingos can actually be very easy to set up now with words and phrases with the different softwares that are available online. Other offerings include our Conversations in Cultural Fluency webinars, and you're able to see that at Six Nations Polytechnic's YouTube channel. And I have those listed in the top right. Not sure how well you're able to see them, but those are on different topics. Lunch and Learn series, these we hold every month. One at the Oswego campus and one at the Brantford campus, and there are different topics, such as our first one in September was on the Indian Act in Canada, and this month is on Deyohahá, one of the chiefs in the early 1900s. And these are an hour long, and most of them now are from topics that people have suggested at previous sessions, and those are open to the community. And we do also do ones that are hands-on, so they can come and make something and take it home with them. And this summer art camp, We Make It, that was a 2-week art program with students from grade 6 to 8. We did some teachings with them. They went to some museums and art galleries. They took some art workshops, and they actually developed the pictures and the stories themselves, and then we had it translated and published. So that it has English and either Cayuga or Mohawk versions. And we sent, I think, a set of 30 to each school on Six Nations, and they do have questions for each story, so they're able to use them in class and ask those questions at the end of each story. Other resources that we've created, bicultural science resource and teacher manual. Rick Hill, I believe, had been asked to judge one of the science fairs. He didn't see too much traditional knowledge in there, and so he developed with community members and teachers this bicultural science resource, and then they also held teacher workshops. They had to put workshops on there. They also did workshops so they could learn how to use the material in the classroom. And we recently developed, well, maybe five years ago or so, Cayuga language apps and a Mohawk language app. Yeah, they're being updated right now. Because technology is always changing, right? So our apps, some of them you can't download on newer phones right now, unfortunately. So we're just having those updated. We've also developed Mohawk and Cayuga language resource books, and that one on the right there is our most commonly used phrases. And we do have others like with the Great Law, the Thanksgiving Address, and one's also in Mohawk. And we also have developed and also translated some storybooks, such as the Munch kids' books, and created some of our own, such as on the creation story. Other projects we're involved in include bringing archives back to the community. So what I mean by that is working with people in places like the APS to bring archives back to the community, bring that material back home so it's more accessible to community members. And there's 3 of us here, we can gather that information rather than each individual going out and looking for that and gathering it themselves. And also taking archives out to the community. So when we're having events on the territory, we are taking these pictures, for one, Brian, that we've gotten from the APS, and the stories that Taylor's going to be talking about later. We're able to take those out to the community and have discussions with them. They look at photos, and they tell us their stories about those photos or those places where their parents or great-grandparents, great-grandparents used to walk. And we're also recording speakers, so recording much of the language as possible, audio, video, and also textual. And just more partnerships, working with places like Woodland Cultural Center, which is close to us, and about Haudenosaunee and Six Nations as well, Six Nations Library, Archives of Ontario, places like that. And we also have the 2 research partnership meetings, which is, I'm going to read my notes, bringing together faculty, student researchers to learn more about Haudenosaunee culture and archives, discuss Haudenosaunee research methodologies, and just to be a sounding board for the research that they are working on. And we meet once a month from September to April. And that book on the right, Deyohahá, Sharing the River of Life, is just a combination of different writings from members of that group. And I believe that's coming out. It has not out yet, but it will be coming out. And we may have some book launches going on at the IKC. All right, further projects, preserving Haudenosaunee languages and ceremonies through the digitization and translation of the J&B Hewitt collection. So this one happened about 12 years ago and involved actually taking some of our Indigenous knowledge guardians to the Smithsonian in Washington, which is a big task, right? They did have helpers. They were able to go through the collections and decide what materials that they wanted scans of and to bring back to the community. And that picture shows one of the documents being translated by one of the Indigenous knowledge guardians. Unfortunately, that work is slow. I don't think we got too much of that material done, but it is an ongoing thing. So J&B Hewitt did have his own orthography, which we had to decipher, and then also translate the material and put it into the newer orthography for newer learners. The next project is Pathways to Creating Speakers at Neha at Six Nations. This was a study done by Six Nations Polytechnic, and one of the key findings from that study was, I gotta take my glasses off, the path to create a critical mass of language speakers through adult immersion programs, or to create a critical mass of language speakers is through adult immersion programs and having 3,600 contact hours. And that's equivalent to 4 years of full-time study to make them, or to move them through the 5 stages of learning acquisition. And that, I believe, is available online, that study, on our website, www.snpolytechnic.com. And our next project was creating, this one came out of that study, is creating speakers and documenting our oral legacy at Six Nations of the Grand River, and that was a 3-year adult Hugo immersion program that took place at Six Nations Polytechnic. And I do talk about Six Nations Polytechnic and the Deyohahá. They're kind of inseparable. We're kind of one and the same, but a lot of the material at the IKC Deyohahá contributes to the material used in the classes. We try to help teachers with curriculum, and hopefully some of that comes back so we're able to share it with the community as well. So that's important for us to share that material with the community. And now Taylor's going to come do the next section.
Can you hear me okay? Is it good? Everybody's good? Okay. I'm having a bit of deja vu right now too, because I had a dream we were here doing this type of thing. And this was when I was like, I don't know, a couple of years ago, just seeing this and being here with all y'all. So I just got a couple of things I just want to give a couple of shout out to thanks. So I just want to reintroduce myself in language. So my name's Wahadandi. It means like it's on a new road or a new path. Turtle Clan and Hugo Nation. I'm from Six Nations of Grand River. And I just want to say like a quick thank you to or a quick nyawa to all my teachers and ancestors who paved the way for us here, and all the teachers and mentors that I've had, and that really like helped me really grounded me into my culture. Like I grew up in my community. I grew up learning language. I grew up in the immersion program. I've grown up going to ceremonies and all that type of stuff, and it was really impactful. And I was really thankful for my grandparents and aunts and uncles, because they really made it feel good to be Ungohome. Like I guess what I'm experiencing is not everybody had that type of experience that made you feel good to be Ungohome, be good to be a Native person, be good to be an Indigenous person. Like it was never a down thing, or you never felt like you were downtrodden. It was always something great, and it made it feel like it was like the best thing possible. And I'm very thankful for them. I'm also thankful for like our relationship with Rick Hill, like he's a mentor. Like I started in 2014. Like I said, I just finished university. I didn't know very much. My grandparents had just passed away, and so I didn't have, a knowledge base anymore, because those people were really influential in my life. And so I didn't have those people anymore, and so I got this job shadow. I was job shadowing Rick Hill. And I had met him a few times here and there, and like I never got a chance to sit down and talk with this guy. But one time he did a guest lecture in my class for me. And I remember watching it, and I was like, that's what I want to be. Because he was talking about, it was like, he made it like interesting to be like a historian, but also talking about our history, and he's very knowledgeable too. So I'm really thankful for that, and like all that mentorship he's given. Other people I'd like to thank too, just real quick, is like Brian Carpenter and Timothy Powell, who've come to our community. That's a big deal, just to come into the community and to come face to face in person. And to me, that was like a lot of respect. And like, I didn't know too much. I listened to a Vince Shifford's story yesterday, and I was like, wow, that's my story too, because same thing with Rick Hill. 2014, I didn't know too much about archives, but I knew about material that's in there. And so like I'd sit there and like I'd waste my lunch break just sitting there reading material, because it was answers. These were things I was always interested in growing up. It's like, why do we do these ceremonies? And some people just say, that's just the way we do it, and that's it. And that's all you get as an answer. So it's like, wow, there's got to be answers to these things. And so that's what I started digging around. That's my starting to start learning about this stuff. And I'm very thankful for like the opportunity, because like it was a really big deal when we come to the APS. Aside of that, that was like the second archives I've ever been to. And it had such an impact on me anyway. It was just like it blew my mind. And then to actually see and touch the material and look at the material and recognize those names, it just felt something. And I don't know, it was just like, I don't know, magic, I guess. So I just wanted to give that a quick thank you for all those people there. So we kind of jump ahead here, because we're jumping ahead with these timeline, and I just, like, how did we get to knowing all these names of people who come to our community? I'm just going to skip ahead real quick, because I know we're kind of getting short on time, but I want to jump right ahead, right to this layer. So does everybody love a good mystery? So this is like, when we first come to the APS, we had gotten a series of stories, and we got a bunch of other material. One of them was this F.W. Waugh collection. Up until that point, anybody I talked to in the community had no idea who this guy was. We had no idea that there was a researcher out there who did all this great work. We had no clue about this person until we come to the APS, and we had gotten this set of stories there. It was like 157 stories amongst the other stuff that we had gathered. And I still remember like going through all those stories one day, having a look at it, and then writing out all the language that was in those stories. And then I realized there's more to those stories. There's actual cultural information in those stories. So you need to have like those cultural lens to read those stories because you pick out all kinds of information in those stories. And it was really like, there's something to this. There's more information that's being told in these stories, and which I'll show you in a second. But anyways, going back to this mysterious disappearance. So FWA, Frederick Wilkerson Waugh, come to our community in 1911, all the way up until 1918. And why he stopped at 1918 was that we had like a series of, like plagues, like tuberculosis outbreaks, and so it had expired a lot of our community members. And so a lot of his resources at that time were gone or passed away, and one of his last resource was Simeon Gibson, but he had left for the First World War at that time. So this kind of ends like Waugh's adventure at Grand River in 1918, but it doesn't end his research up until 1924, so 100 years from today. He mysteriously disappeared in Ganawage, so the Mohawk community. So that's where he mysteriously disappeared. So if you know anybody from Ganawage, you should ask about the missing anthropologist, because everybody's got a story about this guy out there, and it always starts with something. I won't go into it because the story is kind of very. But anyways, so learning about like this person mysteriously disappeared, and he has all this great stuff, and it was like, where is this stuff? Because we had the stories, and I was like, now what do we do with this stuff? And it took some digging around to find out where this collection actually was housed. And then, so it's like digging through books, and we find some random pictures, and those names match those stories. And it's like, are there pictures of these people? There has to be something. So keep in mind, my knowledge of archives was like this at that time. And I didn't know nothing about that stuff. I didn't know they would be connected to larger things. So as we were learning, we had learned that there was something at the museum, Canadian History Museum, CMH. And if you're not familiar with that place, I would definitely check it out, because they may have some of your resources in there too. But anyways, we sent an email to the archivist, Benoit Thoreau, and very kind to us, and said, yes, for sure, you guys can come check this collection out. However, one of the things that I'm sure some of you all have faced as well is that funding problems. Having money to go to these places is a big issue, and it's a big issue for us as well too. And so Timothy Powell and the APS have really helped us out in a way, like it just slingshotted us into like learning a lot about archives and collections and stuff like that. And I have to say, like, it was like, I can remember that time he come to the community and we were talking about these stories and how excited we were. And then to actually go to the museum, like the big day to go to the museum and to actually touch the books and read the stuff that's in there, it was mind-blowing. I think I took about 2,500 photos that day on my phone. We had 2 days. So it was a snatch and grab. Just photos. And then like I couldn't stop and read something, because if I stopped and read, that's 20 minutes, that's 30 minutes, gone. Every minute mattered. And so you're taking pictures. And of course, I'm sitting here talking to Rick at the same time. I'm sure he's got the same kind of thinking where it's like, I need to get through these things. Why are you bugging me? But I'm like, look at this. And the same thing happened at the APS too, where it was like, oh my God, look at this, Rick, look at this. And I'm like, I'm sure he was just trying to sit there and read too. But I get too excited about things, and it really like sticks with me. And all this stuff feels like it happened yesterday. I can still remember it, everything about it. All right, so a couple of cool things about the Waugh collection. So one of the things that we did find was a whole story in Onondaga in 1914. It's by a fellow named Peter John. It's called The Boy in a Nuthatch. It wasn't translated yet. And so when we found stories like that, that's when we got excited, because it's like, oh my God, that's like raw knowledge right there, and like, what can we gain from it? And of course, we're fortunate enough to have some translators. We have a fellow named Marshall Abrams from Onondaga, and he translated it for us as well. And he did a really good job. And so, we can translate this language. And that's the craziest thing, is when I see the Cayuga language in there, I can read it. Because it reminds me of the language that I've heard growing up. So it's really great. So yeah, there's this bio. Like, I don't know if you need me to go through anything with him, but just a little bit. He worked at the Canadian Museum of History. And one of the things I really enjoyed about his work was that he wasn't like an academic. He was an amateur historian, amateur writer, and he was an amateur collector as well. He lived in Toronto, Ontario. And we don't really know that connection between the museum and Waugh, like how those two connected. But anyways, they hired him in 1911. And at that time, the Canadian Museum of History had a standing order in our community with the Seneca Chief John Arthur Gibson. And he had the title Skanyadayo in our community. And so he was widely regarded as one of the most knowledgeable people in that time. And so that was the standing agreement, and they would purchase items, and they'd send researchers to come in there. And it's up until like 1911, Edward Sapir comes in, and then Goldenweiser comes in, and then enters in F.W. Waugh. And when I read F.W. Waugh's first notebook in 1911, he actually talks about having dinner with Chief John Arthur Gibson and Alexander Goldenweiser. Those two people are extremely important for us too, Goldenweiser and Chief John Arthur Gibson, because they recorded concerning the League, the official version of the Great Law in Onondaga. So it's a widely accepted version of that, and so we're very thankful for that. And keep in mind too, John Arthur Gibson was such a knowledgeable person. He ended up passing away in 1912. So a year later, he ended up passing away. But we have a lot of great information from him, and like he was very knowledgeable. So we're very thankful for that. And just to see like the interactions and just to get like just the feel of it. And it was like you get to be alongside of this individual as you're reading these stories. It's like you're part of the conversation too. It's like you're listening to it. You don't get to say anything, which is like, oh, why did you ask him this? But it's just something like that, like you just get really excited about these things. And you see even like the little panels, the margins of the little things and the notes that we see in there, everything is like magic in there. Everything is something valuable. The language is extremely important in there. I got another slide for you. So things that we learned about was when we were at the museum, it's like, what does the collection entail and how big is this collection? And so that's what we ended up learning more about this collection. And it's about 40 notebooks. But then what I learned later is that there was actually about 80 notebooks, and there's some that are missing. So now we have a job to go find more of these notebooks. But yes, there's about 250 250 photographs, and pretty well everybody has been identified in those photos. He did a really good job at keeping notes of who he took photos of, and so we're very thankful for that. And he has about 540 items of the material culture. He collected it from Grand River. He kept all the receipts. He has all the names of people he purchased it from. And so we actually toured the museum. Me and Rick got to have like a behind-the-scenes tour of this museum, got to see the items. So it was really fascinating stuff. And one of the things about the collection is we also got to learn about who did they interview, because there's a lot of names in those notebooks. And so working with the museum, building those relationships with the museum, they're able to send us these documents and build our own relationship with them. So just like with the APS, we end up building more of a robust relationship with the Canadian Museum of History as well. And so we have a list of all these names now. And keep in mind, this list isn't like finalized. Like there are omitting some names in there as well too, especially from other communities. So again, it's like very fascinating stuff. And what we did learn though is 1912 was his most busiest year. 1911, he just sticks at Grand River. But in 1912, he actually visits a large body of Haudenosaunee communities. He even comes to Tonawanda, and also, Tonawanda, New York, and also Onondaga, New York as well, too. Two big places that I was really surprised at because, with outsiders coming in, the community is very conservative at times. So I was just really surprised to see that he had ventured out to that far and had gathered some really good information. And he actually took a lot of photos. So it's been really good that way to connect with other communities about this material that we have now, because it's like there may be something relevant for you in there. And then another thing that I thought that was really interesting, and this kind of ties into building those relationships with other organizations. So this is Archives of Ontario also assisted us in this. We gave a presentation there and said, oh wow, we have something from him. And it was a letter from this lady named Helen Merrill, which I believe actually came here somewhere. Like she was working in Ontario and then she actually moved to Philadelphia or something like that. So if somebody more knowledgeable about her history maybe can chime in at some point. But she actually ends up writing a letter and they're corresponding with each other. And he ends up telling him he had gotten adopted. But let me stop there for a second. So this notebook here, 1911, he went to one of our ceremonies and he documented the whole thing, which I was really impressed by, the names, everything. And one of the questions he asked is, can white people dance at our ceremonies? And the answer that he got was, if you get well-liked, or if you're well-liked, and you get adopted. And so this letter, he talks about, in 1912, while spending time in Onondaga, he talks about getting adopted into the Oneida Nation Turtle Clan. So he was really all in on this, and you can tell the dedication he had to learning. And then, of course, we did learn, there was photographs. There was actually a large body of photographs. And one of the unusual places that we found was GSC reports, so Geological Survey of Canada reports. So that was one of the very first organizations that it was a branch underneath the museum at that time, the Canadian Museum of History. But anyways, some of the things that we found in this collection there, so we found the photographs. So that's David Jack and John Jameson Jr., who are, oh, hang on. Okay, yep. Sorry, I'm getting more excited. It's like when you go down a hill and you gain momentum. That's what it's like for me sometimes. I get too excited and then those neurons in my brain just fire together and it's like all those connections go. All right, so yes, so David Jack and John Jameson Jr. Are very important too. So about John Jameson Jr., he provided the transportation, as we found, that he had a horse and buggy. And so Wal would end up staying on a horse and buggy and they'd go travel to all the places. And the other thing that we found in the collection too, not just photographs, which are extremely important as well, and they tell a lot of stories in there, but we also found customs in there, storytelling customs. So a guy again, here's my story with storytelling bees. So this was a lot of our culture that had been displaced, or we didn't know about these things. We didn't know that people got together at night and told stories like that. like story beats and like a little bit of customs around it, even like saying he had, and then I had to go talk to some of my relatives about that too. Like, so there's a thing there. So it's a guy, here's my story, and the storyteller would say like whatever, and then they said, well, people who enjoyed the story, they would say he had. And so I ended up talking to somebody about it because I had never heard that before, and I asked people around, and one of my great uncles, like my grandmother's brother, he told me, maybe an offshoot of Onondaga, Wahe, he said. So maybe something from Onondaga that way. Anyways, the other thing that we found too was, the thing that was really interesting in there too was this, so when they would tell these stories, they'd pass a hat around and you just throw in whatever you want, gifts or whatever. But when a story got really good, they would stop and pass that hat around again. And then if you really want to hear the end, you had to pay up. It wouldn't be like something small. It could be like a cigarette, it could be a tobacco, it could be $1, it could be like silver, it could be anything. Like, it's not about that, it's about gratitude and that you're just thankful for the speaker. That's all it's about. It's not about consequences, it's about gratitude. And other things that we found in there that was really fascinating too was some of the, like this item here, the Uksa Deyohahá, this red belly. And so he's somebody that appears a lot in those stories as like a hero type person. And one of the things that's really interesting with it is that they mentioned in the bottom there that at present time, so about 1915, that it was referred to the youngest in the family, the babies, because they're the closest by the fire. And you find like historical accounts about our people traveling, and when they traveled, when they camped for the night, it would always be the youngest by the fire, and then it'd be like the women, and then the old people, and then the young men. And that's how they traveled their boat to and from in the bushes there. And there's a couple of stories in that collection that talks about that too. So it's not, again, these aren't just stories in there. They're actually like oral histories in there. But it's just like intertwined into like a little bit of storytelling that's in there. And again, like that's what's so neat about this is that he didn't just copy it in one language, but he got multiple languages. And the other thing that I would add to that too is that, there's a ton of language. Like I could talk all day about this stuff because, we don't have the time, and I had to reduce this to a couple images. But there's, there's word lists, there's like everything in there I could ever ask about for language. It's in there, and most of the languages are in there too. So the only thing that's kind of a little bit lacking on is Tuscarora, but or Skarura, but like everything else in there is like a pretty good details in there. Like it's good. Probably one of the best collections I've seen. And then so some of the photos in there too, just to kind of connect it with the William Fenton collection. So it's one of the individuals that he talked with was Simeon Gibson. I'm not sure if anybody's heard of him before, but he was Cuga, he was the son of John Arthur Gibson. So he was present amongst many of these anthropologists at the time. But he's the key to this. Oh, in my thing I can see 3 photos, but up in there. So digging around, like at the museum, we did find some correspondent letters, and so like that's where we really learned, like, okay, there's other things that we can look at too outside of just these notebooks that can tell us more information. And so we learned through like, so Dr. Edward Sapir was the first anthropologist, I think anthropologist of Canada, and so he was the director of the ethnologist and linguistic division of the Canadian Museum of History at the time. And so one of his colleagues at the time, one of his underlings was Diamond Jeunesse, Alexander Goldenweiser, and I think Marius Balboa and Frank Speck as well too around that time. And then that's what we learned was that through like that correspondence with Diamond Jeunesse and Dr. Edward Sapir, so Dr. Edward Sapir after his tenure at the museum took a position at Yale University. And so he writes this message to Diamond Jeunesse, who is now the director who was the director at the museum, saying like, oh, about that wall stuff that you had there, like it's a shame to let it go to waste. I have this new student, this young student that's really interested in taking the task, and his name's William Fenton. So that's how it kind of ties into that. And we get a lot of, he kind of gets a lot of flack too, it seems, that he came and took these documents. And that's kind of like the story that we heard about it, but it kind of sheds more light to it, that he didn't just take it, but more, he was interested in it. However, the problem with that though is, had they taken it to our community at that time, you would have had so much more people to talk to. Right now, it's just coming back to the community in the 2020s. Like it's almost too late. There's still people to talk with, but it's almost too late. This would have been good 20, 30, 40 years ago, had they had brought it to the community. But anyways, we can't get hung up on that. We have to keep moving forward. So there's another photo of his collection as well too. I'm not going to speak too much, but like I said, there is like Simeon Gibson, so there is that connection that they work together. Oh, I want to say, like I almost forgot to tell you this. So if anybody has any problems with the cursive writing, so shout out to Marge Bruchak. She came into she visited our community one time, and she seen I was struggling with like the cursiveness. And she said, what you do is just make an alphabet. Just go write down A to Z and start writing down the letters that you recognize. Make a little code there, a little glossary. After a while, you'll be able to predict it and read it. And so ever since she told me that little bit of information, it changed my mind again. And like, I couldn't believe it. Like, it really worked. So if you're struggling with cursive and things like that, like, make your alphabet. It makes it so much more easy to read that stuff. And then after a while, you don't even need that alphabet because you can just read that language. You can read the handwriting. All right. And then just a little bit about the stories. So we had some stories. Like, how much time do we have? 5? I can tell you like a short story. So we have a couple stories. I just want to mention about this story here. It's a Hato, which is our version of Jack Frost. And so it's a contest story. And so it's about this hunter who defeats the cold. Why this story is really good, and like, so it's about 11 pages, so I won't go through this one for you particularly, but in the story, it talks about like how to make winter clothing. It's a story like about an uncle and a son, or sorry, an uncle and a nephew, and they're getting ready for the winter. And so it goes in there and talking about like, shoot a deer that's 1 year old, and it's good for like rope, or if you use like the neck of the deer for your moccasins for the winter, it's like extra thick for it. So again, there's a lot of details and stuff that's very applicable and useful information, but it's tied into a story, but you can see that's how we learned long ago. It wasn't just like a story, but it was like information in that story. And how are you going to remember this information? Through a story. That's something my grandpa used to tell me. So that's why we told stories, is so you can remember these things. So that's, yeah. I can even tell you a little story about how I learned about plants and medicine, of a certain plant that we learned. Good for arthritis. I was out for a run one time, and the tree had fallen across there, and I ended up jumping across there and climbing up there like Tarzan. It was a big tree. You could run across, and I jumped down. I remember jumping down, and I landed, and I could feel like stuff stabbing me. And I was like, oh. I ran out to the pathway again. I could see I was all covered in these needles, like not like syringes, but like plant needles, like thistles. And I could remember just like burning, and I was like, oh my God. I thought it was like poison ivy or something like that. So I started off running, and I noticed after a while I started feeling really, really good. Like all my body just started feeling really good. Everything in my body. I could start running, and I just kept going faster and faster. And I looked after a while, all those pine needles were gone. And then I ended up talking to one of our elders about that, and he said, that's good for arthritis, that medicine. Did you know that? I was like, oh. And so that's why I learned about that plant and why it's really good for arthritis. So, so I'm often tempted to go find that plant again with my legs to go for a run. Little speed boost. But yeah, so that's how those stories are, intertwined with information there. A little bit of humor in there too. And this story here, I have to tell you real quick. So my grandmother used to tell me a lot too when we were little, don't play with your food or it'll run away on you. And so it'd always be something like, what? And I remember reading the story, and so the story is about this guy who, they call him Hoyot Dwadi. It means like a good man. They don't do bad things. So just a good person, I guess, if you will. Again, how our story started, he's a very charitable person, generous, feeding people in the community, like a really good hunter, sharing his food, everything with them. Looks after all the people in the community. So that's like typically how these stories go. If it's a really good person, that's what they're doing. So anyways, he ends up going, and his parents are always bugging him about getting married. They want him to get married really quick, and it's kind of funny that they're always like kind of harassing him to get married. But he said, I don't need that. Like, I'm good as is. Like, I don't need that. Until one day, this woman, his mother could hear at night like this woman talking in the house there in the longhouse with him, and she got kind of nervous or curious. She was excited at first, and she wanted to know who it was. So the next day she went to go see who it was, and there was nobody there. And he didn't say much about it, anything. So she kind of just dropped it, and then next night again, she heard somebody talking again. And she got really excited, and she wanted to go see who it was. And then she was just wait till the morning. And then again, morning happened again, nobody was there, just her son. And then so this time around, at night she said, I'm going to go in and see who this woman is. I want to know who she is. So she was getting close again, it was nighttime again, she could hear that woman talking, but she said, your mother knows who I am now. She said, she knows who I am, I'm going to show myself tomorrow. And so the mother just dropped it there, and so she ended up waiting until the next day. So the next day, waited around, and so she showed her. She said, oh, I've been sent here. I've been here to give you a gift. So she ended up showing him, it was onahaga, the white corn. She said, this is a gift for your people. It's very different now. And the other thing that they mentioned was osahe, the beans. So these are a gift for your people now. Because up until that point in the story, it says that they only hunted. So that deer meat was their only primary source of food at that time. So this was something brand new, and it was easier. It wasn't as labor-intensive as it was for hunting at the time. So people got really excited about that, and it made life easier for them. And so she showed them how to make cornbread, like corn soup and things like that. So she showed them how to make these different things, and the whole community was happy. And so everything was going good up until the point where his brother come back, and he had been gone throughout this time, and he came running in, and so he was there, his wife was there, and she was making cornbread, and so a custom they mentioned was that when you have leftovers, you would just throw it on the fire and make it like a little bit, it'd be a little bit like a harder bread, but it's all about like not wasting the food, right? So that was the thing, was not to waste that food. So she goes, that's all I got for now, and she gives that to him. And then he looks at it and smells it and takes a bite, and it makes like a gross face. He also does something very gross too, but it gets lost. You lose the message if I tell you. You can always ask me, you'll lose the message if I tell you. But it goes back to a very strict custom that we have about it. My grandma was very strict on it. And like, even to this day in the community, it's very strict about like customs around eating food and not to pass gas, because that's what he ended up doing, is passing gas. And that was a thing where it was like, so it broke her spirit, is what it said. Like, it broke her spirit, and she started crying. She was inconsolable. She could not stop crying until her husband got back. And she said, I'm going to leave. I'm taking all this food with me, taking everything. And so that's what she told them. And so and when the people come to you, don't listen to them. I'm not going to help you. It's not until the very little ones that can barely just speak, who are crying for food, those are the people I will help. When you get those people, come find me. I'm in a cornfield. And so that was the message. So they said at night she'd left, and they said they had all, like, if you've ever seen like our corn braided up, it looks really beautiful. It's all this braided up corn. So everything just fell right down. All the stuff just left. Just like what my grandma had told me. They played with food and it left them. And so the next day people seen everything was gone, and it was winter time was coming up, and so people were scared, like, all their food sources were gone. What are they gonna do? So all the men, women, everything went over and harassed this guy and say, go talk to your wife about that stuff. And all you had to do was just listen, take that in the community. And then eventually he ends up talking, like the babies start coming to him, because there's little kids that come to him, but he can't do nothing. And then it's the little babies come to him, and they're crying this time. So that's what he said, that's what I was waiting for. And he takes off running, and he doesn't stop until he reaches her. It's like days that he takes off running. And he meets the woman, she's like, I've seen everything that's happened, and they take this message with you. Not to be like playing with the food, but to be holding it in deep respect for it. And so like to hold it really tightly, I guess. And so she made like this bag, and so it gets really interesting. Like it'd be interesting to know how they translate this, but to have this bag, and she fills it up with this corn and stuff, and she gives it a shake, and it's like a little tiny bag, but she says, don't open it till you get home. So he spends days running home, like he doesn't stop, and it's like almost to the point of exhaustion. He makes it to his village, and he throws that bag down, and it was like a little tiny bag, and it exploded into this giant bundle of food. And so everybody was happy, but what he found out later was that a lot of people in that village had starved, including his brother at that time. So ever since then, he relayed that message to people that to hold this high reverence towards our foods. And even to this day, like we have ceremonies for that, but also like even when we're done eating, we say Yawa, like it's just to give thanks and our gratitude to it. Because our culture itself is all about gratitude. It's all about thankfulness. That's like the core of it. And so this was a chief here. His name's Abraham Charles. He had the title Haga Anyok. He also worked with J.M.B. Hewitt himself as well. All right, do you want to talk a little bit about this one? About our little museum, or? Oh, or do you? Oh, yeah. Are you done? Yeah, I'm good.
Real quickly, because Taylor, I know he was going to talk the whole time, which is fine with me. But on our museum, so, I'm very thankful, that we've been able to obtain these documents and these old photographs. So, this photograph here is Mrs. Simon Bomberry, and she's making like a corn husk mat. And then over here on the right side, we actually had this donated by someone in our community named Elizabeth Dockstader. So it's really awesome to be able to have, these old photographs of people doing these crafts and making these things that, and then finally now it's coming back to our community, and we're able to show people. So Elizabeth Dockstader owns everything corn husk at Six Nations. And I'll just jump over because I know we're running out of time. So we were kind of wanted to do like a then and now, a few photographs. The photograph on the right from Bread and Cheese, which is, You have to search that up, what that is about. So this photograph was from the 1920s, and then on the left there, Taylor took that picture, and that was this past year in May. And this next picture is the Fenton photographs from the 30s of the old council house, and this was originally where the Confederacy Council would do their meetings. And then on the right side, this is Taylor's photograph from 2024. And just take note of the date on the top of that building, which, you know, is still in our community. It's 1863, before Canada became a country in 1867. So I'll just leave it at that. So yeah.
Thank you so much. I think we have time for a few questions. I do have one that I could ask, but I could also just open it out to the audience, given the time. Okay. So you've told us about your you've worked with so many students, younger and older, with so many visitors. I'm wondering like how you're seeing the impact of this. Of the work you're doing beyond the Indigenous Knowledge Center, within your wider community.
I'll try to answer that. So when we had in the beginning stages, and like I think there was talks about the center being created even before I was there in 2010. So it was around 2006, you know, we had conversations, and one person that has helped us, you know, and still helps us to this day is Dr. Daniel Coleman from McMaster University. And he always, you know, wanted to support us and help us create the center, you know, so that we can educate our students, our community. And then the last couple of years, I had talked to him and I said, hey, Daniel, you know, I want to just tell you about the day I had. I said, today we had students from our language program come and do research. We had STEAM Academy. We had some students from the high school come in for a tour, do some research. And then there's a Mohawk immersion school in the community. I can't say the Mohawk name, but it's called the Everlasting Tree School. And they had their grade 8s come in researching some of the stories. And I told him, you know, that was my day, like helping all these people. And he, you know, almost had tears in his eyes. And he's like, Heather, that's, you know, farther, you know, like the reach, you know, that's farther than, you know, what I could have ever have managed for the center to be. So I think we, you know, we're reaching farther than, you know, we ever had.
I'd like to hear more about how you engage teachers in teaching this material and how you give them the confidence to talk about it, because I work with treaty education and people happy to hear from me, but they're very reluctant to incorporate what they learn in the classroom.
Well, I can kind of chime in a little bit because I'm also an instructor at Six Nations Polytechnic too. So we cover history as well too. So I integrate a lot of the archives in there too because I've seen the advantage of it, and also because I work in a center. Getting others, like that's a big area of like I'm often advocating that we do engage with more of the educators because there's not enough, and I think we really dropped. I think there was a really lost opportunity during COVID between archives and education to connect about learning, and because there is a lot of great information in the archives, and the thing I'm learning from. The thing I'm learning from some of my relatives who are teachers and even at the elementary level, there's a need for resources. But there comes two big things with this though. So awareness and accessibility. And that's always a big thing too. Awareness of the collections, knowing what's out there, because a lot of times people in our community don't know what's out there. So that's one of the things I really tasked myself to learn, and that's what I see. What I had in that timeline was learning about everybody who come into our community or wrote about our history. Learn as much as we can about that. And what are the things that they can share with us? And then, of course, like doing presentations in our community, having open house events, sharing this information with our community. Let them know that, these resources are there. Of course, like on social media, we're also very active on there. We're just trying to let people know that there's material out there for you, whether it's like your relatives or if you're there just to learn, or like you want to know more about our community, or you got school projects. We're there. Like, there's also human resources in the center, like Tanis and Heather. I'm always kind of directing people towards them because they work directly with the collections and they know where everything is in there. So that's what I'm saying. Like, I'm always advocating, go talk to them because they'll help you out almost better than I can. Yeah, there's my.
So we have run a couple workshops where we've invited teachers from the local elementary schools on the reserve. So I think we have 4 elementary schools and then 2 immersion schools, and they go from kindergarten to grade 8. And then the one immersion school does have a high school. So we just, make people aware, like at these open houses or, workshops that we provide, and actually have created, it was from Tom Deere, actually, about 5 years ago, one of our Indigenous Knowledge Guardians, and he's been a teacher and a principal at the high schools, and he said, Heather, you need to create this list, this teacher resource list. So this has been like over 5 years in the making, but I think I've got it up to about 300 items on that list now. But it's curriculum, lots of plans, any kind of resources. But if anyone knows Rick Hill, there might be 1 page of 10 there. But like we have all the resources right there, and I always make them, available to the teachers and remind them, things are already here, just change it or any way we can help. Like, and I know that Everlasting Tree School, I always help them with their stories. Like, they know they have a lot of their own stuff, but I always welcome them to come in, and I know it's that time of the year, storytelling, so they're going to be saying, hey, I need the story. And I know that they're busy too, so I always let them know, just send me the request form, because on our Polytech website, we're under the Research and Resources tab, and there's a form that you can fill out, and I always get them, just fill it out, send it to me, and this one teacher will text me and say, hey, I'm done class at 3:30, and I know you close at 4. So I'm always, sharing and helping with them. And then there's other people that we know that work in with other school boards off the reserve. So just recently, in the past couple of months, I've been helping. So there's a man from our community that has been helping a couple school boards near Toronto somewhere, and he would be focusing on traditional games and going in talking about. And he says, Heather, I know the basic stuff, but I don't know, the background. So he actually invited me to his school board meeting. So I actually got to go into one of the school boards and go on Zoom and have a meeting with them. And since then, we have one Making a New World, a book that was created by Rick Hill, and the artwork, Helen Hill, I think, she created. And it's just a basic creation story book, and from that meeting and all of that, they put in an order. They want 130 books. So, but I've been helping them with resources and information, and I always let them know that we're here to help. Like, I know we don't even know it all, and we can give you all the information, but we're always here to help. Or we're gonna send Taylor in for a talk, and he'll be there all day. Well, that's a few ways that we try and engage some of the teachers.
I'd also like to add that we work in an archive, but that's kind of the last thing we do sometimes. That person walking in the door, we're going to attend to them. That request that comes in over email or text, we're going to get to that. We're invited to an event, we're going to go to that community event, putting on a presentation. So eventually we get to the archive, so once in a while. So, and we always find this interesting, fabulous stuff in there. Thanks.
Thanks so much. There's no questions online, but we have 62 people listening in, and there's a few comments that from people that you may know that I just wanted to read out. Julia Garlow says, Tanis, you're doing a great job. Lindsay Brooke Johnson says, your energy of excitement is a family trait, Taylor. So knowledgeable, cousin. Amazing job. Proud of all of you. And then maybe we can end with you guys doing the correct pronunciation of what else is in the chat, which is Swajagdo, Swagego. Good job, guys.
Swajago, swagwego. It means like, it's words of encouragement, like you will persevere. Yeah.
Thank you so much. We should give one more round of applause to Heather, Taylor, and Tanis.